Hey everyone, welcome back to I Dream of Indie. Ole Gamer Joe coming at you with another review today. We are looking at REZ PLZ, released onto the Nintendo Switch, Steam, which is where we played it, as well as the Xbox One as of July 15th, 2020. The game was developed by Long Neck Games and published by Graffiti Games. It is a puzzle platforming co-op adventure with a very unique twist, the fact that you have to kill yourself in order to advance through some of the puzzles. The game will normally be priced at $14.99. While this is a game that is designed around local co-op, you can actually play it single player. It's not the recommended way to play, in my opinion, as we'll get into, but it is an option. REZ PLZ tells the story of two bumbling wizards named Arcan and Zeph. They are brothers, and they seem to be lacking in responsibility as they've done a lot of drinking the night before a pretty important magic lesson. The duo manages to kill themselves in a variety of different ways, including blowing themselves up, but thankfully in this universe there are resurrection stones which allow you to bring yourself back to life. Unfortunately, their village comes under attack by an evil force known as the Dark Arcanum. Now it's up to these two not-so-talented wizards to save the day, freeing the villagers and stopping the evil forces. I spent the majority of my time in this game playing co-op with Silent Signs, but I did test out the single-player mode as well for review purposes. Interaction in this title is performed if you're using an Xbox controller, as we were. With the B button, you'll use this to talk to villagers and other non-playable characters, as well as to pick up objects. Because there are two different characters that have to work together in this game, you will need to rely on the Y button quite a bit as well in order to pass the camera, as sometimes one character may have to go off into the distance while another character stays stationary. Regardless of whether you're playing single player or local co-op, you will be using this button quite a bit. You also have a very basic staff attack which can be used against enemies by pressing down the X button, and then you can jump with the A button, which you'll have to do quite a bit of platforming in this title as well. You'll actually have a few other different abilities as well using the triggers, and you will collect more magic spells as you progress throughout the journey, one of which allows you to boost a character higher up so that they can complete a wall jump, for example, to get to an out-of-reach area. Most of the magical abilities that you will acquire tie into the puzzles pretty heavily. For example, at one point you'll be able to turn into a rock, and this allows you to hold down objects as well as bust through the ground, or the ability to absorb fireballs and then shoot them back down the path so that you can advance further through something that might have been blocking your way. REZ PLZ is a game that 100% relies on its co-op aspects for sure. If you're playing it single player, expect a pretty frustrating experience as it gets annoying rather quickly bouncing between the two different characters. While the game doesn't feature any online mode, at least in the build that we played, you can use the Steam remote play option to summon a player that way, but local co-op is probably your best option here. Even in co-op, however, expect a lot of frustration, as it didn't take long for me and my partner to get pretty fed up with some of these puzzles and the overall control design of this game. It really doesn't feel as good as it should. There's a bit of a floatiness to your characters, and a game that requires precision at times really does need to be mechanically solid. Unfortunately, I felt like the jumping was not quite there. Getting boosted up to higher areas can be an obnoxious experience where you have to jump right into your character at the right moment and then perform a pretty clumsy wall climb in order to get higher. I might be able to forgive the floaty controls a little bit more if the puzzles were satisfying, but that's not usually the case. While there are some clever moments involving you having to kill one character for the other character to progress, there were too many situations where these puzzles were more frustration than fun. For example, at one point we swear we found the right solution as it had worked on previous puzzles. We had to have a flame fly into a certain object in order to light it so that we could progress, but suddenly that logic didn't apply to the next puzzle. It really didn't make any sense. We struggled and struggled over and over again trying to light this flame, and at one point even hit the object with the flame, though it just disappeared, only to find that we had to be standing on the other character's head when we hit the flame forward so that the puzzle would activate. It was pretty ridiculous, I'm not going to lie, and that's just one of many examples that you'll find throughout the game. It's pretty frustrating because of the fact that some of the puzzles are pretty satisfying. I enjoyed, for example, being able to impale one character on the spikes so that another character could advance, but more often than not, these puzzles were pretty frustrating experiences that don't respect your time whatsoever. Graphically, however, REZ PLZ is not a terrible looking title. There's some pretty nice pixel art here, and the backgrounds are fairly well detailed. There isn't a lot of variety to the levels outside of the overall puzzle design, so expect to see a lot of the same assets over and over again, but that said, at least there are 35 different levels for you to go through and 5 different realms. At the end of each realm, you will encounter a boss of sorts. It's usually just a gauntlet that you'll have to run, solving a variety of different puzzles again in order to take this boss down, but at least some of those bosses are nice looking. Overall though, REZ PLZ is a fairly attractive looking game. Sound-wise though, nothing exceptional here. The soundtrack isn't really memorable in any way whatsoever, and neither are the sound effects. There's no real voice acting in the game whatsoever. I should also mention that the writing in REZ PLZ was not for me. I didn't find the game very funny whatsoever. It's trying to be a little bit edgy and maybe cater to a specific kind of audience, but I just didn't get any laughs out of it whatsoever. I think there was a great opportunity to give these characters fun personalities similar to something like the Lost Vikings characters back in the day, but instead they're pretty flat, boring wizards that just get drunk a lot, and it's not at all funny. The two lead characters also don't play any differently from one another, so that doesn't really help to bring much personality to them either, and you can expect the same for the villagers, pretty flat. Overall, the graphical presentation of REZ PLZ is enjoyable enough, but the audio side of things could have used a little bit more work. REZ PLZ, well, this was a frustrating experience for me. I really do like this concept of your character dying in order to advance, and it's used in some clever ways at times. Some of the frustration can be alleviated by using the game's infinite mode. I'm not even sure if that will be in the final build, but in the review build that we had, you were able to turn on infinite lives. But even still, it's the puzzles that are ultimately going to trip you up in this game, and the illogical reasoning behind them is very frustrating. This isn't helped by the fact that REZ PLZ isn't mechanically sound enough for all of the concepts that it introduces. If you are jumping into this one looking for a fun co-op experience, I would just advise you that you're going to face a lot of frustration here. You're probably going to be yelling at your partner at some point. Be aware that this game does have some illogical puzzles. There are a few moments of brilliance in REZ PLZ, but unfortunately they're pretty hard to come by. So will you be checking out REZ PLZ? Let us know in the comments section below, and if you have enjoyed our video coverage today, consider hitting the subscribe button to help us bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming. There's a ton of other ways to support I Dream of Indie down in the description box, including our Patreon page or our Discord. However you end up supporting us, we thank you so much for doing so.